At the Frederick Douglass Academy in Harlem, there are two Monroe doctrines. One was authored by President James Monroe and is taught in American history class. The other one is laid down by Dr. Lorraine Monroe, the school's principal. That Monroe doctrine is a set of strict rules and a philosophy intended to prove that a cross-section of disadvantaged kids from New York's inner city can compete in a public school with some of the best students in America.
You have a class, Mr. Nixon? What, are you on vacation?
You can find her most mornings patrolling the hallway. Dr. Lorraine Monroe delivering what she calls her death stare that can prod the most sluggish students along.
Why are you so late? Come on, come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on, come on.
It's called the Frederick Douglass Academy, but you won't find any ivy growing here. It's located in central Harlem in a large, bleak public school building surrounded by wire fencing. 80% of the students are African American, 20% Latino, and 75% of them are living below the poverty level. But when they walk through the doors every morning and file past Dr. Monroe, they're no longer poor kids from disadvantaged neighborhoods. They're Frederick Douglass scholars. Things are expected of them, and anything is possible.
The kind of education that we're giving kids doesn't depend on who their folks are or where they live.
So every student here is expected to go to college?
Absolutely every single one. There are no exceptions.
And not just any college?
Not just any college, but really prestigious ones. And we have convinced our kids that they can do it.
It is a public school run like a private academy, aspiring to offer an education that rivals what some wealthy families in New York pay $15,000 a year for at the finest private schools. Students must apply to get in, and only 1 in 6 are accepted. But grades are not the most important criteria. Some test above grade level, some below, but everyone has to show potential. And 75% of the students must come from Central Harlem. When the first class graduates next spring, Dr. Monroe wants to see a quarter of the students land coveted slots at Ivy League colleges, a figure some consider optimistic. How can you realistically compete, taking kids from very poor neighborhood?
You can realistically compete because, well, part of it is my personal background. I was raised in this community, so I know what sterling education is in New York City. I know that in Central Harlem you can learn. I left the 9th grade knowing how to read, write, think, compute, speak Spanish, and lead. I know what can happen when the teacher is sterling. I know what happens when there are standards and children are held to them.
She began her career as an English teacher, then rose through the ranks, guidance counselor, dean, principal, and finally in the late 1980s, vice chancellor of New York City schools, where she was in charge of instruction for the nation's largest school system. But in 1991, when the opportunity presented itself to start a public prep school in Harlem, she decided to return to school administration and put her theories into practice where the rubber meets the road.
Kids learn a lot of stuff that you didn't ask them to learn.
In her spare time, she teaches education to graduate students at Bank Street College in New York City and consults with school districts in more than 30 states. She is frequently called on to spread the Monroe doctrine at teachers' conferences like this one in Orlando.
I come from teenage parents. I come from violence in the home. I come from a home split up. I come from living in a slum. I come from people who work dead-end jobs. But I went to school. I went to school. And I had people such as yourselves who said, I see something in you and will not let you go. And whenever people say, well, you know, Dr. Monroe, the mother's on crack and the father has disappeared and there's 6 children, I say, you ain't teaching them.